In the latest new power update, France has received a new top tier main battle tank in the form of the Leclerc S2. While boasting the same great firepower of the earlier Leclerc, some critics have said that the S2 is practically a copy and paste. So what actually is this tank? And does France now have a competitive top tier lineup? Alright lads, today I'm going to be taking a look at the performance, weapons and playstyle of the Leclerc S2. Starting as with the basics, this vehicle is a rank 7 battle rating 10.7 main battle tank located in the French tech tree. Being a rank 7 tech tree vehicle, it will come stock and you'll have to grind out its modifications to unlock the full potential of this vehicle. It will also only be effective at grinding out other vehicles between the ranks of 6 and 7. To unlock this tank, you'll have to grind out 400,000 research points before purchasing the tank for a cost of 1,030,000 silver lions. You will then have to crew the vehicle for a cost of an additional 300,000 silver lions. To purchase the expert and ace qualifications for the tank, it will cost you 1,030,000 silver lions and 2,100 golden eagles respectively. You also have a fairly cheap repair cost of 5,386 silver lions, but as this tank has just been released, its repair cost will most likely be substantially increased in the coming months. Going on to the rewards, and the vehicle has a base RP modifier of 2.38, which gives you an RP modifier of 238% with a free-to-play account and 476% with a premium account. Your base silver line modifier of 1.5 is pretty good, and you can expect a 150% silver line modifier with a free-to-play account and 225% with a premium account. Looking at customization, and we have several camouflages available to purchase, including woodland, desert and winter camouflage schemes, with my personal favourite being the multi-purpose 4-rod camo. I'd also like to mention, I now have a squadron. If you'd like to join, simply click on the community tab in the top left corner, then squadrons, and then simply search Sako in the search bar. Okay, so starting as always with the engine and performance, and just like the previous Leclerc, the S2 is powered by an engine producing 1,475 horsepower. However, due to the S2 weighing 1 tonne more at 55.6 tonnes, the vehicle actually has a slightly lower power to weight ratio, with 26.5 horsepower per tonne. While slightly worse than the original Leclerc, this is actually incredibly good, and gives the S2 an excellent acceleration and mobility compared to the Soviet tanks, your most common adversary. Moving on to the transmission, and we can see that the Leclerc has a top speed of 71 km per hour, and with your rather high power to weight ratio, you reach that top speed pretty quickly. Being French, the reverse speed is considered the most important design element, which allowed engineers to give the Leclerc a reverse speed of 38 km per hour, allowing the French to retreat in record time. Being a NATO top tier main battle tank, the S2 naturally has the ability to neutral steer. This, combined with the high power to weight ratio and top speeds, gives you a very fast, very flexible tank, allowing you to quickly respond to a changing battlefield. Overall, the Leclerc is incredibly fast. It is a struggle to find even a single thing negative about the tank's mobility. Its combination of speed, acceleration and manoeuvrability makes it one of the fastest moving NATO tanks. Okay, moving on to armour and survivability, and the first thing to mention is that the S2 has a crew of 3 men. This gives you relatively low survivability, as you will only be able to lose 1 crew member before the tank is destroyed. Like all other top tier main battle tanks, the Leclerc is plastered with composite armour on the upper hull and turret. This gives you amazing protection against chemical energy weapons, as well as substantial protection against kinetic energy penetrators. Like the M1 Abrams series of tanks, the Leclerc has blow-up panels in its turret bustle. This is where the majority of your ammunition is stored. However, unlike the Abrams which stores all of its ammunition in the turret, the S2 can only carry 22 rounds, with the remaining 18 rounds being stored in the hull to the left of the driver. This means taking more than 22 rounds into a battle will result in your tank becoming a rolling ammo rack, so I'd recommend taking 18 APFSDS rounds and 4 HeatFS rounds. But we'll talk more about the ammunition later. Moving on to the armour performance itself, and to test this, we'll be using the DM53 shell fired by the Leopard 2A6. Starting as always with the lower frontal plate, and as you can see the armour protection ranges from 70mm all the way up to above 550mm. This is due to a large composite block sitting just behind the lower frontal plate. This plate is effective, but it does not cover the whole of the lower plate, only the top half. This leaves the lower part extremely vulnerable to both kinetic and chemical warheads. Like several other NATO tanks, the upper frontal plate is relatively lightly armoured, only giving around 260mm of protection, pretty weak compared to most top tier Soviet tanks. While nominally this is quite low, the upper frontal plate is extremely well angled at around 75 degrees, giving the round a pretty good chance to ricochet. If we move up to the turret, you can see that the cheeks are pretty much immune to all rounds in the game. As you can see, the turret provides over 800mm of armour in some places. However, if we move inwards, you can see that we have 2 very flat plates that compromise the armour of this tank. The first on the left provides 500mm of armour, and on the right, this cutout provides 600mm of armour. While against most APF SDS rounds, these flat plates will be enough to stop an incoming shell, if you are facing the DM53 round, it can still punch right through it. Like all other modern tanks, the breach is a major weak spot. In some spots, the Leclerc only offers around 90mm of breach protection, and as you can see, the breach itself is a huge, easily distinguishable part of the turret. Moving to the side of the vehicle, and protection decreases substantially, down to around 120mm at the front, and dropping as low as 42mm in some areas. Moving up to the turret, our protection at the front of the turret is actually pretty good, but as we move down the length of the turret, your protection decreases, down to around 180mm in the crew compartment, and only 47mm around the ammunition bustle. And finally, the rear of the turret provides 29mm of armour, and the rear of the hull provides just 10mm of armour. Overall, the Leclerc S2 has a decent level of armour protection. While it doesn't stand a chance against a Leopard 2A6, it offers you great protection against all of the other APF SDS rounds in the game. This armour, combined with the aforementioned great mobility, make the Leclerc S2 one of the most dangerous vehicles to meet on the battlefield. Moving on to the weapons and ammunition, and as you can see the Leclerc S2 is armed with the GIAT 120mm cannon. Being a modern vehicle, the gun is fully stabilised in both the vertical and horizontal planes. The S2 also has the NATO standard 20 degrees of gun elevation, and a slightly below average 8 degrees of gun depression. While slightly worse than several other NATO main battle tanks, I never found it to be much of an issue in game. You can carry 40 rounds in total, with 22 of those rounds being classed as first stage ammunition stored in the turret bustle. As I mentioned, carrying any more than 22 rounds means ammunition is stored next to the driver, making it very vulnerable to enemy fire. So taking a look at the reloading skill under the loader section, and as you can see that we have a constant 6-second reload rate. This is due to the Leclerc S2 featuring an auto loader. This replaces the loader, hence only having 3 crew, and gives you a constant fire rate of 10 rounds per minute. While this isn't the best reload rate of NATO tanks, it is still very good, and far better than a typical Russian reload rate of 7.1 seconds. Moving on to the targeting skill under the gunner section, we can see that you have a base turret rotation speed of 21 degrees per second, which rises to 30 degrees per second with an ace crew. This is slightly below average for NATO tanks, but it is far better than most Soviet main battle tanks. Next we move to the modifications, and I want to point out that this tank gets access to a laser rangefinder, as well as 3rd generation thermal imaging for the gunner and commander's sights. As well as these thermals, you get a nice wide field of view in the gunner sight, as well as a base 4x zoom and an optional 12x zoom. Moving on to the ammunition, and we have 3 rounds available, 1 stock and 2 unlockable. Unfortunately for you, your stock round is the OCC G1 Heat FS round. It travels at 1100 meters per second and can penetrate 480mm of armour. This is a pretty decent stock shell. The high muzzle velocity of the shell does make it relatively easy to aim, making it a pretty decent stock shell, but it is still a Heat FS round, and you will suffer at top tier. While your stock round will be carried out with a Heat FS shell, luckily for you, you do have a tier 1 APF SDS round. This is the OFL G1 shell, and should be unlocked as soon as you have parts and FPE. The round travels at 1650 meters per second, and is capable of penetrating 394mm of flat armour, and against armour angled at 60 degrees, it is still capable of punching through 228mm of armour. To be honest, this round is very good. While it is a little bit lacking in the penetration department, for a rank 1 shell, it's a great first APF SDS round. Your last unlockable shell is the OFL F1. This is one of the most powerful rounds in War Thunder, being able to penetrate 575mm of flat armour, and against armour angled at 60 degrees, it still manages an incredible 332mm of armour penetration. This is an amazing round, and can penetrate most opponents from the front. However, against some of the later Soviet tanks, you will still need to aim for the driver's port weak spot. The Leclerc also has a coaxially mounted 50 caliber machine gun, as well as 14 smoke grenades, which fire 7 at a time, giving you 2 individual smoke screens. Overall, the firepower of the Leclerc S2 is incredibly competitive. While not as powerful as the Leopard 2A6, almost 600mm of penetration is more than enough to take out any tank you will meet on the battlefield. The high power round, coupled with a fast reload, high generation thermals, and a wide field of view gives you an insanely powerful weapon system. To conclude, the Leclerc S2 is a great tank. It has high mobility, a powerful main round, as well as a fast firing cannon. While the armament survivability does leave a little bit to be desired, it is still a very capable main battle tank. You can work around not having tanky armour. The high mobility and devastating cannon make you very flexible on most maps. You can shoot and scoot very effectively, as well as being incredibly potent in the supporting role, giving high firepower backup to the much more meta Leopards on your team. While there is no doubt in my mind that the Leclerc S2 is a good tank, whether you should grind it or not is wholly down to you. There are basically no practical differences between the standard Leclerc and the Leclerc S2. This isn't a vehicle that offers a unique playstyle style or experience. It has the same strengths and weaknesses as the earlier Leclerc, so if you are looking for a new French powerhouse that changes the meta of the game, then this tank isn't it. But it is still a very competitive tank, and finally gives France a decent top tier lineup to compete with the other nations. Personally, I've incredibly enjoyed playing this tank, and I do think it is worth the grind. But I'm a big fan of top tier tanks, and maybe you aren't. The top tier War Thunder experience feels very much like an abusive relationship at the minute. You try and walk away from it, but you keep being drawn back in by guiding releasing new vehicles. It's important to remember that this is just my own opinion. What do you guys think of this French baguette launcher? If you have any questions, criticism, positive or negative, or even like to request a review, please feel free to leave a comment below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully you should have learned something new about this tank. If you did enjoy this video, please do consider leaving a like and subscribing. But more importantly lads, I hope you have a great day and thank you very much for watching.